welcome to this video related to the sheet 1C input from console. In this video we're going to break down the process, a very straightforward process of receiving input from a console window. So that's our aim here. Input is from a console. Now bear that in mind, because in later years you will have to work out how to get input from graphical user interfaces, etc. So bear in mind the mechanisms we're interested in is console specific. The exercises of the sheet will then go on to get you to look at how to get input for different types of data. Now the concept to bear in mind is that we've already introduced the idea that if you're storing a whole number, that's what you would write. Type of data, variable name. You can then put any whole number into that piece of code. Okay, and you can do other things like add whole numbers and store it in there and so on. Okay, so this is data types. Data, variables, and data types. When you are getting input from a console, with Java, you don't simply receive an input, a generic raw input, okay, and then store it in a variable. So say you were asking someone for their age. Let's take that as the logical one. You can't simply write age equals some kind of function which says raw input, give me your raw input, it says here, with a semicolon. That's not how Java works. What you can guess is that if I have to tell the variable what type of data, then I also have to tell the console what type of information I want the user to input. So that's how input from console is connected to data types. So the easiest way is to work our way through simple examples and look at the peculiarity of the language of how Java does that. In order to use, so let's get out another blank project. You can start a fresh project or you can carry on with this. In order to get input, we need to use the import methods and functions. They're called scanner, and scanner functions need to be imported. So you type in the word import, and notice where I'm typing it. It's outside of this line here, public class program. It's on top of it. It's underneath the package and underneath in there. So you import, you go to the Java library, you then say give me your utility library, hit the dot, and then you go capital S scanner, and that's what you import. Now by importing that java.util.scanner, the scanner is the method, the function, the object, all built into the scanner of how to get console input. Now what we need to do here is ask a simple question. How do we go about getting input? What are the mechanisms? So let's have a look at the mechanisms so you can keep in mind how you do it. In order to get input, you need to create an object. So let's call it, as I've done, input. So that's my object. So if I just declare that separately for a minute, that's another thing you can do in Java. You can simply declare the type of component you have here. Now this input is the label I give to my object, which is going to receive my console input. So let's create an object to do the job. Okay, now that's the critical element, and I'm splitting this up in this video, whereas in the code for the sheet it's all in one line. Now this is going to be new to you, and so you have to understand what I'm writing as the way that Java says I'm going to create an object, a component to receive input. So this line I've done separately because this essentially defines or declares the type of data, okay, that you're dealing with. This line does something really important. It actually creates an object. And the clue is the word new. When you see the word new, you're creating an object. What kind of object are we creating? We are creating an object which will be responsible for getting input from a console. So if I just write here input dot, and I write here, I want to, let's say I want to get an integer, I want to get someone's age, right? So I type in the word next, and then you'll notice a list of things come up: next int, next float, next byte, next etc., boolean, etc., etc. I want an int, an integer, so I do that. That's the way that I would grab an integer from the console. But if I type that on its own, the big problem, the obvious problem, is that it's going to grab it from the console, but where is it going to put it? So you need to store it in a variable. Okay, so this is standard logic. So I need to define a variable that's going to store it. And I said, as previous example, I've got an age. So I'm going to say, okay, age can receive that input. So that's what those two lines do. That declares my variable age. That asks, doesn't say anything. Notice there's no text. It will simply put a cursor up on your console, but it won't have any text to say, please enter this, please enter that. So there's some stuff missing. But before we add that in, let's simply output what we enter. So we can see system.out.println, and so let's output age. And we can make this sort of slightly clearer. We can say you inputted, and then have a little line there, a little bit of string, plus sign, and age. Put a semicolon at the end. Okay, so what should happen now is that I declare the object that I want, one of these input scanner objects. I then create it, right? Now those two lines are quite crucial, and you can collapse them into one line, which the text in the notes which support this video do. They do it all in one line, but I've split it because the concepts are separate. Then I declare an age variable which is going to store whole numbers. I then, using the next int from the input object, grab an integer from the user, from the console, store it in there, and then I'm going to display it. So let's just have a look how that looks and see whether it makes any sense when we run it. See if there are any errors and see if anything else is going on. So it's run it, but notice it's completely blank down here. There's no text, it doesn't say anything to me, so I could just put the letter ER. If I put that in, it crashes. Now, why does it crash? Why do you think it crashes? It crashes because I've asked for an integer and I've put a bit of text in. Not happy with that. Let's run it again. So I've got no idea what to enter. And in fact, this is often a really important area when we come to errors. What happens if I put a decimal point in? It's going to crash again, right? Because it's expecting a whole number and I've entered this. So there are a couple of issues here. First of all, you haven't made it clear on the console what to input, okay? And secondly, it's going to crash if you pass it the wrong type of data. So let's pass it the correct piece of data and watch it work. Okay, so it's running. I don't even know it's running, right? I just assume it is, mainly because there's a little stop sign over here, right? And if I just pass it a number, you inputted 34, right? So let's give it some text. So we know from the very first video that to put some text on your console, use system.out.println. So let's put a little prompt in here, say, please enter a whole number. Okay, I'm assuming it's age, but I haven't said it's age. Now I've got that just before the line. Let's run it and let's see how it displays that on the console. There we go, we've got an error. It's quite useful because there's a little red mark which I didn't notice, and several of you won't notice this. You will find these types of errors appear a lot, and very helpfully it's told me it's missing that. If you click on the line, it'll take you to where you should have put it. You pop it in, so the environment is there to help you make sure that if you've got a typo, it'll help you spot a typo and give you more information. Right, let's run it again. Please enter a whole number, 45. You inputted 45. Nice and simple. So the lesson, the key element, which the rest of the sheet will get you to explore, is how do you get string input, how do you get Boolean input, how do you get the different types of data inputted and stored. And you can use this video as an example just to practice it. It's a very, very important concept. The one thing I won't mention at this stage is how do we stop errors from appearing if you type in a piece of string or a double when it's only expecting an int. That's a question for later, but there are very important mechanisms which you can and you should learn.